Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Francis Cecilia again from GlobalNet 21. And as you know, this is one of the regular webinars we do, often weekly, where we look at interesting people doing interesting things, people making a difference in their community, whether their community is global, local, or national. And today we've got Caroline Bernard Moxley with us. Now, Caroline is one of those people doing very useful things. She does a lot of work with the homelessness problem that we all face in our society today, and in fact, many societies globally. And she's going to tell us a bit about that. She does a lot of other things as well, but we're going to speak to her very shortly. Okay, so Caroline, thank you for joining us, and it's great.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great that you're here with us today. Before we talk about all the work you do, and you do a tremendous amount of different things, maybe you could let people know just a little bit about yourself, very briefly. And what
okay. Well, I work currently for Homelessness, which is a membership body for homelessness organisations. My background is really health, social care and housing. I've sort of come through different policy and communication roles over the past sort of 15 years or so. Before that, I worked in the private sector for a long time for Marks and Spencer supplier. I changed career in my mid-30s and never looked back, really. So now I work for charities and I am happy doing so. My kind of passion is about making a change and making a difference, and be it in social care, in health, housing, in homelessness now. That's what I do. So that's
well, that's great. I mean, we did a House of Commons meeting once with Jenny Edwards, who used to be the Chief Executive Officer of Homelessness,
right.
And
yes.
She lives locally. She's now involved with Enfield Voices and a number of other things. So it's great that you work with that as well. But you also do a number of other things, don't you? I think you're on the trustees of the Enfield Carers Centre.
I was,
and the Fawcett Society.
That's right. I was a member of the board of Enfield Carers until just this year, and I resigned this year to join the Fawcett Society. I've just joined the board of the Fawcett Society, as you know, charity that's about equality between men and women. So again, really excited to be part of that because I'm very passionate about women's equality issues and gender recognition and all the issues around that for women and men. I think it's really important that we look at diversity and equality across the piece. So really pleased to be joining Fawcett right now as they go forward in their, work around women MPs and some of the issues women in public life are facing, the whole issue around, power and gender and an equal pay, of course, as well as a big thing they're doing right now too. There's lots of campaigns they're working on and I'm very pleased to be part of it.
So you're a very busy woman, but in Homeless Link, what's your particular responsibility there?
Right, so the team that I co-lead takes care of policy, so that's government influencing work, research, so research into homelessness issues, information, and that covers Streetlink, which you mentioned earlier, and also communication. So we do the website, digital communications, as well as traditional public relations and comms. So we have quite a broad range of disciplines in our team.
Okay, well, we'll talk about Streetlink in a minute, but I mean, just homelessness at the moment. I mean, it's a problem. It's growing, it's growing, it's growing. I mean, why do you think this has happened? What do you think is behind it?
Well, there are a number of issues that cause homelessness, and I'm going to talk about a few of those. And I think when I say what I'm going to say, people might think it's quite simple, but when I talk to you, you'll see it's quite complicated. So homelessness is a result of, we believe, quite a number of structural issues, such as welfare reform, which has been the last few years where things have changed around universal credit and wider welfare reform. That has driven people into poverty, which leads to homelessness. There's also the issue of an unregulated private rental sector. So landlords can end tenancies whenever they choose to. There's no regulation around that. So people are forced to become homelessness through that. There's also people's lives are complex as well. So people may have childhood experiences that have led them to have mental health problems, which have caused them to become homeless. So there's often things that lead to homelessness. And I mentioned childhood experiences, but that can lead to mental health, which leads to alcohol or drug addiction, and which leads to homelessness. There's lots of different things that happen in people's lives, and people are very complicated individuals, and that's often where these things take place. So homelessness happens as a result of many different things, and there's lots of structural issues we need to be aware of that cause homelessness.
Yeah, and one section you missed out is older people. I mean, that's a growing number, isn't it? People who
Yeah,
pension age and can afford the rent.
yeah. So older people over 55, say, are a growing number in terms of people who are on the streets. I mean, don't forget, homelessness can be street homelessness, and also people in temporary accommodation, sofa surfing, we call it, staying with friends and family for long as they can. There's also hidden homelessness as well. But people who are older really should get support from, be it social care or other ways of housing. So sheltered accommodation is one of those as well. But the cohort that Homelessness represents is really the kind of single homeless people who are often younger, maybe from 18 to 50, 55. That's a group that often are falling through the cracks and ending up on the street or living in insecure housing. The old population really should get supported by sheltered accommodation, but we know that doesn't always happen. But we are seeing more older people who are street homeless, who are living with long-term addiction, for example, long-term mental health issues, and growing older on the streets. And we're very keen to think about how we can do more to support those individuals as well.
Okay, before we go into that and Streetlink, etc., I suppose I have to ask you this. We've got a new government now with a majority, which means the Prime Minister can do pretty well what he likes. What would be your message to that government in regard to homelessness?
Well, we did a coalition of different organisations in the lead up to general election. It was us, Shelter, Crisis, St Mungo's, DePaul and Centrepoint worked together to put a manifesto to the new government. And in there, we talk about a range of things. We talk about the welfare reform. So welfare safety net needs to be in place. We've talked about supply of social housing. So there needs to be more social housing built across the whole country, not just in the cities. Think about, again, about individual complex needs that are there as well. And we've asked about the cost of housing. So the cost of rents need to be in line with benefits as well. So we've asked for a few things in our manifesto. We've written that and put that out there in the lead up to the election. And we'll be reiterating those messages as we go towards the new government and tell them, and to hold them to account for what they've said they're doing in manifestos. The government in place now made a number of pledges in the manifesto that they were quite light on addressing structural issues. Lots about home ownership, a bit about housing first, which is another model I talked about later as well, but not a lot of detail in terms of ending homelessness in the wider sense. So we'll be calling them to account and trying to get them to recognise there are some quite deep-seated underlying issues that have to be addressed before we can end homelessness, for good.
So, I mean, you don't just help homeless people, you do advocacy as well.
So our members do the support for homeless people. So our organisation is an umbrella body, and our members provide the actual direct services to people, which would be advocacy, helping them with their complex needs, helping them to find accommodation and keep accommodation. So our members do a whole range of different services, and our organisation provides the evidence through the research. We do training for individual organisations and people. We do have events, conferences. And we also have a system called Inform, and Inform is a system you can use to actually manage your client journey and see how they're progressing and help them to, again, end their homelessness through managing their situation through the Inform system and tracking their journey.
Okay, so you do all these things, but you've now started on something which sounds like a really exciting innovation, and that's Streetlink. Maybe you could tell us a bit about what that is.
Yeah, Streetlink's been going since 2012, I believe. So it's going for a few years now. And we've what it basically is, it's a system by which you can help an individual who sees sleeping rough. So people see people sleeping rough and don't know how to help them. Streetlink is an app. It's a phone line and a website, and you can use it to report an individual who sees sleeping rough. If you download the app, it's free through Android and Apple, and you can actually use it to record the person who sees sleeping rough. It will pinpoint where they are. This then goes to the local outreach service, who will then send, not immediately, it's that between 2 or 3 days, will go to the individual if they're still there and work with them to find a way of supporting them off the street. Now, one of the challenges is that because people don't feel safe on the street, they may move from the location they're at. So a person may not be found by services, but if they are in the place they are at when they've been reported by the individual who reports them on Streetlink, they will be found and supported off the streets. I know Enfield has got Streetlink in place and they're using it quite a lot. I was out on the street count recently in the borough, and I spoke to one of the outreach workers on the count too. So I know that they are using Streetlink, quite a lot in the borough. And also the figures are confidential, but I saw what happening in the last quarter, and the engagement with services is quite good, but of course, because people are moving around, the numbers not found are higher than they probably could be. But I think, again, it's about people feeling safe and obviously having to move on to stay safe on the street.
So, Streetlink has been around for some time, hasn't it? It's just the app that you're talking about that's the fairly new innovation.
Yeah, the app was updated last year. So the app's been around for a few years, but it was updated last year to improve its functionality. So when you now use the app, it will drop a pin in the map so that the service can see exactly where that person is. So we're really keen to spread the word about Streetlink. And there's a new Streetlink London launch just last week, because Sadiq Khan is launching a Bluff strategy this week as well. And he was really keen to have a London-focused Streetlink app. So there is on our website, you can see a link to the Streetlink London website from the homepage. And also the Streetlink app has a London focus on it as well. So we are looking at capturing the data for London as well as for the whole country.
So the Streetlink app is really a way, is it, of getting ordinary people out there who see that there's a problem to know that they can contact someone who can then do something. Exactly.
It's a way you can actually help individual sleeping rough. If you don't know what to do, you can call Streetlink, or use the app to report them to Streetlink.
Okay, so take us through the process. I go out on the street now. I see someone who is sleeping rough, who is homeless. And I use the app, I send a message in. What happens then?
So initially you'll go onto the app. You'll have to sign up to a thing called Streetlink Community. So you need to actually register before you actually report the person. So you'll do that first. Then you'll be asked a series of questions, where the person was seen, whether they're male or female, description, and all much information as you can put in there so they can find the individual more easily. That will then go to the local outreach service, who will then capture those referrals, and then over the next couple of days go out to those locations and look for that individual. Now, sometimes the individual may be known to the services. They may know them already, so they'll know that individual well. They'll be able to go out to them and see how they're doing and see if they can get them in if possible. Sometimes the person may not wish to engage, and that's their choice. But, more often than not, we try to get individuals in to services so they can be supported to end their rough sleeping. So it's a process of kind of referral. So the referral goes in through the Streetlink app or phone line or website. The local services will go to the individual, and then from there it's recorded whether they're going to be supported, whether they were not found, whether they didn't engage. It's all supported it's all on the system, recorded, and then we can download the reports and see for each individual area what's happening with the numbers in those areas.
So it goes to the outreach service. Yeah. Who is the outreach service? Is it the local authority only, or is it other organisations like voluntary organisations as well?
So local authority, but I know that in Enfield we have Thames Reach. So I know Thames Reach do the outreach in our borough. So it will go eventually through the local authority to the outreach service. But I know that also some of the local authorities work with volunteers as well. But in terms of the phone line for Streetlink, we've got volunteers working on that. So we've got volunteers working in the office 24 hours a day, taking calls on the phone as well. But in terms of the actual going out to the individual, that's done through the local outreach service, which in our borough is Thames Reach.
I guess you hope that as a result of the app, a lot more people will be referred as having a problem. Do you think local authorities are geared up to deal with that? Do they need to develop a strategy around Streetlink? Do they need to work, as you said, with voluntary organisations, make sure that they have enough volunteers, know how to do it? Or are they still a bit behind on this?
I think most councils are doing it very well. I mean, there are some councils where they're not engaging as well as they could do. And what we do, we keep an eye on those, and we have individual conversations with those. Well, it wouldn't be us; it would be the MHCLG, the Ministry of Community and Local Government, who funds Streetlink. So they often will have that direct contact with local authorities through their local teams. But certainly, in the main, most local authorities should have a strategy in place anyway for homelessness across the board, and Streetlink can form part of that. So from what we've seen, it is improving. We obviously want to see more engagement with Streetlink, and local authorities are very good at sharing, especially in the winter, sharing the phone number in the app and the details of the website, so we can get individuals to use it. We encourage the use of the app a lot more, because that's quicker than making a phone call, and the service can be reached much more quickly through the app. So I think that on the whole, charities are working well with local authorities, and local authorities are doing their best to engage with individuals through the outreach services.
Well, I mean, apart from this webinar, how do people get to know about the app, and how do you publicise it, and how do local authorities publicise it? Because I've never really seen it.
Okay, well, this is something that I've often heard. So we have social media. We share on social media, particularly in the wintertime. We will engage and ensure people are aware of Streetlink through the winter period. Local authorities, many of them will have things like posters, and they'll have small cards they can share and put out in their services. So we've got posters as well we can share with individuals as well. So we've got a whole range of different products that we share with local authorities. Councils also do their own, so they have their own logos on the posters that they might make locally. We'll see those and we'll approve the design of those and support local areas with those too. So mostly social media in terms of the way that we share it. That's what we use to do that. I'm sure local authorities probably do a similar thing, but if they don't, they should do a lot more of that. Social media is the way to go, because that's where you can get the most engagement.
Okay, well, I mean, if you share a link with me about the app, I will share it around all the social networks locally, because I think that would be a great thing to do. But when you talk about the homeless, I mean, the people you work with in terms of Streetlink, you're not actually talking about the homeless, are you? You're talking about rough sleepers. In a way, there is a difference. I mean, it's not people who meet begging on the street. It's rough sleepers.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Because often people will report to Streetlink someone they see begging and thinking they're a rough sleeping, but actually they're actually begging. So it's quite an important distinction to make. The definition, as you probably know, is if someone is sitting by their bedding or about to bed down, then they are rough sleeping. If they're just sitting without bedding, they're probably begging. But often it's better to report than not, but we do get quite a few through Streetlink who are begging rather than rough sleeping. But it's important the public are aware and engaged, and if they report someone begging, it's not ideal, but at least they're doing something to try to help. But it's important to notify the difference between the two types of individual.
And do you have any data or evidence of what happens when a person is found as a result of the app? I mean, what does the local authority, the volunteer, do that can be helpful? And do you have any evidence of that?
Yeah, well, if the individual is found in the middle of the night and there is a night shelter available, the service will try to get the person into the night shelter if there's space. If there is not a space, they will ensure they get the phone number if they've got a phone, or find a way of getting in touch with them afterwards, off that day, to make sure they are supported in some way, be it through getting into some kind of services that will help them with their situation. And because people are very complicated, there could well be a whole number of issues. There could be mental health problems, there could be drug and alcohol addiction, there could be a range of things that have to be supported before the person can be housed. But what's important is they get in some kind of service, be it a day shelter, day centre, or a night shelter, to get the support they need to help them to end their rough sleeping. And it often happens over a period of time. It's because people are complicated and these things happen over a period of time. It takes time to get them in, to get them supported and off the streets for good.
Do you, you pass the information over to the local authority and do you just leave it there, or do you collect data about the whole scheme so you have some idea of its success?
Yeah, we collect data on every local authority, so we can see every quarter what the numbers are like, where the highest numbers of referrals have been, where people have been after they've been referred, what the outcome has been for those individuals, whether they've engaged with services, whether they've chosen not to, whether they were begging, so we can capture all of that data. It's confidential. We have to keep it confidential, but we are able to run reports at Homelesslink, which we do. So my team has that in its remit to pull those reports off, and we use them to report back to our funder, which is the ministry, on a quarterly basis, and they work with us to ensure that we're doing that well.
So we could, I mean, that's not available for us, for example, to find out what our local authority or how well our local authority is doing.
Yeah, I can give you headlines, but I'm not allowed to give you the kind of direct figures. But I can certainly at Enfield. I mean, Enfield in the last quarter, compared to boroughs in the surrounding area, we did quite well in terms of engaging with services. Our numbers weren't too bad. So I think that what we're doing in our borough here is we're working very closely with individuals and working really hard to keep the numbers down. I know that we've got issues in our borough with things like encampments and people sleeping in cars. I know that much. So I think that that's made it quite challenging in terms of reaching people. But I do know the boroughs, in terms of other boroughs around Enfield, we've got fairly consistent numbers in terms of how we're engaging with people and getting them into services.
Okay, so when you find someone who's homeless and the volunteers or the local authority workers go out to meet them, what can they offer? Can they offer just food? Can they offer accommodation? Or can they even offer housing? And maybe this is the cue for you to go into housing first.
Yeah, well, Housing First, I'll go through that first. So Housing First is a model that we are championing. Housing First England is run by Homelesslink. We're funded by Convict Relief and others as well to deliver that. And Housing First is the reverse of the traditional. So traditionally, if you're a very entrenched person, rough sleeping, with possibly drug, alcohol, mental health issues as well, in the old system, well, the current system, you have to be housing ready before you're housed, i.e., end your addiction, get yourself well before you can go into housing. Housing First is the reverse. So you get housed first with wraparound support to help you to address your issues. So you're put into a home with no kind of compulsion to engage with services unless you choose to. And you have your housing first, and then you're given that wraparound support in that space with a key worker working with you to deal with your drug, alcohol addiction, any mental health issues you may have, family connection issues, and you're supported in that space. And it's very successful. It's working really well in Finland and in America, and it's working over here as well.
Yeah, it's an idea actually that originated in the United States, isn't it? And
that's right.
The success of it there has been very good. So, I mean, where do you get the housing from Housing First? Again, do you depend on the local authority? Is there a problem in finding the housing for the number of people you need?
That's part of the challenge, because most of the Housing First that we are hearing about in the scheme we're running is private rented sector. There is some social housing as well. So there's some social housing and some private rented sector. So it's a mixture of different types of tenure. We were really keen to see a lot more social housing dedicated to Housing First because we know that it works. So we need housing supply across the board anyway. But I think if we're looking at Housing First, the more we can get in the social sector, the better.
So you sort of lobby housing associations, do you, in order to try and get them involved in this?
Not direct. What we do is we work with local areas, and we've got Housing First project team who are working and doing training in local authorities to encourage them to embed the principles, because we have 7 principles of Housing First. I can share those with you as well after the meeting here. So we've got principles of Housing First. If your scheme adheres to those principles, then you are truly doing Housing First. If it doesn't, then you're not. So we're training the local areas to adopt the principles, set up the Housing First schemes, and hopefully getting more social housing to do that. We recognise quite a lot of it is going to be private rented, which is fine, because as long as the person has a space to live in that's comfortable, that's clean and safe and fit to living, then they can actually recover and end their homelessness for good.
Okay, I mean, that sounds quite comprehensive, but I mean, obviously all of you, including the local authorities, have limited resources, and you probably depend a great deal on volunteers. You said Homelesslink has volunteers, the local authority works with the voluntary sector. If there are people out there who wanted to help, who wanted to volunteer, I mean, where would they go to? Would they go to you? Would they go to Streetlink? Would they go to the local authority?
Well, Streetlink do have volunteers on the phone line. So yes, I do urge people to contact Streetlink if they want to be trained to use the phone, because we always need more volunteers on the Streetlink phone line. So that's something I'll share with you as well. We don't have volunteers directly, but certainly people may call us and ask us how they can volunteer. So there's a range of things you can do. You can go to your local night shelter if you want to support people there. There are also day centres as well. Volunteers can support those as well. So there's a range of things you can do if you want to support. And I think that often people think that they want to give food or clothing. That's all fine, they can do that. But ultimately, you know, a bigger picture is about changing the structure. But in kind of on the ground ways of doing something to help individuals, it is about kind of getting out to your local homelessness centres, day centres, night shelters, and working with people there.
Streetlink also has champions, don't they? And I mean, maybe that's another way people can get involved, but what is a champion?
Well, that's an individual who is working, you know, as a volunteer, actually out there promoting Streetlink in their local area. So that's what we would define as a champion. But if you're part of a Streetlink community, as you download the app and join the community, you become part of a bigger movement there. So we are working with Streetlink community, and they do lots of fundraising in local areas. And we got some really good fundraising done last week through a Christmas concert that happened. So that was somewhere where people donated money, and we got, you know, some income from that. So there's a range of ways people can be champions, but it's really by just logging on to Streetlink community. As you download the app, you become part of the community, and through that you can fundraise, you can do a range of things to support people through Streetlink.
I mean, that's really interesting what you said, that you know, in tackling this problem and involving people out there who are going to engage through the app, you don't just get them to engage and then that's it, goodbye. You create a community, and having a community is a sort of new social network way of doing things. And
absolutely,
that's a sort of exciting way. I mean, did you get a feeling there is a community as a result of doing this?
I think there is now. When we first updated the app and put the Streetlink community on there, people didn't want to engage. They wanted just to report someone, and that was it. But people are now getting used to registering and becoming part of that movement, and they will then be engaged, and they'll get our Streetlink newsletter, which goes out every quarter. That tells people what's been going on, you know, how we're engaging with individuals, what we're doing to end people's homelessness. We'll talk about fundraising that's going on there as well. So I think being part of that movement is becoming more popular now. People understand the need to be part of it, because people report someone sleeping rough through Streetlink, and then they're always concerned they don't hear anything. So by being part of the community, you can hear as a whole, across the whole country, and London as well, now with the Streetlink London app, people are being supported, and find out what sort of numbers we're working with and how across the board we're helping people end their homelessness.
So having that community gives you some idea of your impact with the people who are helping and working with you. But do you have any sense of impact on the problem itself, the problem of homelessness?
Through Streetlink alone, or through the whole range of different ways we're trying to end it? I think
through the whole range, because it's a huge problem.
Yeah, well, the rough sleeping figure that is done every year. So last year's figure was 4,677. That was down by 2%, which is, you know, a small amount. We're happy to have some kind of reduction, but I think that the challenge is that overall the numbers probably are increasing if you were to look at it globally, because the street count that we do is for one night. And there's also hidden homelessness as well. So in terms of the impact on the overall number, we are happy that there was a 2% drop last year in the rough sleeping figure for the counts. But we're keen to see that number going down even more, because we know that there has to be a conversation about the underlying causes of homelessness. Until you tackle those, you're not going to get the number down much further.
That's what I was going to say. It must be very difficult to get the statistics, because you may have been successful, you may have got a reduction, but the problem of homelessness, because of the structural deficiencies, have gone up. So you've been successful, but homelessness has gone up. Yeah,
that's the challenge we've got, because we know that in some boroughs it may have gone down, in other boroughs it will have gone up. So it depends on you know, the situation where you are. Obviously Westminster, being the biggest, you know, the biggest area in London, has the highest numbers. However, there are others. Manchester has an issue as well. So we know that there are parts of the country that have got particular acute problems, that we're keeping an eye on those. But the challenge is, because of those structural issues, we know that the wider trend, that the overall trend is more challenging than it might appear from the annual street count. However, the street count is the method that we use to kind of capture that snapshot, which is really important to keep, because that snapshot gives you that trend that you can then work with, and the government use that figure to do their mapping and their thinking about how they're going to tackle homelessness going forward.
Okay, well, we've sort of come to the end of our 30 minutes. So just to remind people again, if they wanted to get involved in any way, how do they make contact with you?
Yes, so you can contact me through the Enfield Voices. I'm on the group there, so you can, call me and message me through there. You can tweet me on at Carob, CAROBEE. Streetlink.org is our website, so do look on there. Through there you can find social media. You can follow us on social media as well and keep in touch with us. And download the app, because that way you join the Streetlink community and you can be part of the movement to end homelessness through Streetlink.
Okay, well, if you could send me, the details on the app and everything else, I'll make sure that's spread widely amongst our social networks. Anyhow, I mean, that's been really interesting. And you told us about your work, your background, you told us about Streetlink and that sort of excited innovation that in a way is acting as a coordinating body, and I think that's a really worthwhile thing to do. So thank you for doing this and telling us about it, and telling us about it so eloquently. It's been really, really fantastic. So thank you, Caroline.
No, thank you.
Okay, well, thanks, and we'll end this webinar interview now.
It's really neat.
what your background fund is.